Welcome back to Ambitious Millennial Woman, a podcast where I have conversations with clients and other women in my life who are ambitious millennial women making choices that go against the grain, living their lives with intention and thoughtfulness. With that lens, I'm so excited to introduce you to Joy Pirro, who is a current client of mine and a third generation dental health leader. Welcome, Julia.
I'm so happy to be here.
Julia is carrying on her grandfather's legacy as the third generation leader of Pulp Dent Corporation, a company that develops and manufactures dental materials. Before joining the family business, Julia spent the first decade of her career in healthcare, both public, private sector, Series A to Fortune 10, which she's going to tell us all about. She is a self-professed healthcare nerd and passionate women's health advocate, and her favorite way to support women is on the local level, teaching postpartum fitness to her community in Massachusetts, right outside Boston. So, Julia, we are going to start with the same conversation that we start all of our coaching conversations with, which I know you and I are especially passionate about, which is a celebration or a brag. So, Julia, what are you celebrating yourself for?
It never gets easier doing these self-celebrations, but I try my best. This is a small win that actually feels really big. I teach a postpartum fitness class. That's something that really has been a non-negotiable to me as I have gone through several different chapters of my career. It's the piece that I try and keep consistent because it really grounds me and anchors me to this mission that's so important to me. I had been teaching a class. I had amassed a pretty consistent group of women who came with their babies every week to build their strength in their postpartum period. And I recently moved just a few towns over, and teaching the class was starting to put some pressure on me in terms of balancing my other commitments. And so I started to lay the foundation to find a studio in my new community that would allow me to teach the class. I have finally found a studio here downtown in my own community, and I taught my first postpartum class there this week. I'm so happy that two of the moms that had been with me at the old studio came and joined me at the new studio, as well as some really wonderful new women that I've
Wow.
met who are living in my new community. That's my win. It felt like I was sowing the seeds for a very long time. It felt really good to see it come to fruition and get to still do the thing that I love without it feeling like it was becoming a burden.
That's awesome. I feel like that pulls together so many themes that we're going to touch on in this conversation around your superpowers from bringing women together, your love for women's health, and then also just continuously redesigning your life to make it work for you. So, what a perfect tee up. I shared your bio, but tell us in your own words the unfiltered version, the not suitable for LinkedIn version of your career journey to date. Where have you been? Where are you today? And what are some of the decisions you made along the way?
I graduated college with a degree in economics, and I felt like I could have taken that in a lot of different directions. Most of my classmates ended up going into consulting. I've always had this desire to really be passionate about whatever it is that I'm working
Mm.
on. And I couldn't help but feel like I wasn't going to truly get that in traditional consulting. I ended up working at a think tank, and it was a perfect first job because it gave me exposure to people who had taken most of the paths that I was considering. I worked with data scientists, with attorneys and policy folks and public health folks and economists. It helped me really see what their day-to-day looked like. And so I was a project manager, and I was randomly placed in the health policy group because that's what they were hiring for in Boston. I definitely fell into healthcare by accident. Of everything that I was exposed to in that first job, the things that resonated with me the most were healthcare, that this is really a space that I want to build my career. The other piece was, as a very junior project manager, I realized I loved leading teams. I woke up on Sundays, thought about how do I better motivate this group? How do I organize this team? And realizing that, I honed in on, I think I want to be a business leader. So ultimately, I decided to apply to business school and knew I wanted to stay in healthcare, but wanted to move into the private sector from the public sector. It was around the time that I started my job at the think tank that I found out my cousin was going to join my family business. Up until then, it had sort of been up in the air of whether or not it was going to be passed to the next generation.
Mm.
And finding out that my cousin, who's about 15 years my senior, was joining the family business, it really unlocked this other part of my brain. Then it was like, well, naturally, that's what I'm going to do too. There was never really a question. It was just a question of when. I give my dad and uncles a lot of credit. They really encouraged me to continue exploring my career, go to business school, not to rush into joining the family business. I went to business school, absolutely loved my experience at Tuck, used that as an opportunity to first just try out what it was like to work in corporate America. I worked at CVS Health. I got to work on some really cool, interesting things and learn what it was like to work in a big corporate setting with KPIs.
Hundreds of thousands of people.
Before there could be an internal company announcement, I was there when they acquired Aetna, and it was like very satisfying for my healthcare nerd self to be part of that transformation. I don't know that I necessarily would have left had I not found this really cool opportunity to work in women's health. I worked at a women's health startup. It was Series A. I was there as we raised our Series B. It was a polar opposite experience of working at CVS, learning to work with board members and investors and getting to work on something that I was so passionate about and also try on business development for size. Something you'll hear as a theme is that figuring out what functional area I wanted to work in has always been a big question mark. And the answer is none of them. I think the answer is that I'm a general manager.
Them to a certain extent.
From there, I took a little bit of a step back. I was dealing with some health issues and burnout as a result. During that period, I consulted for an old boss at a startup, but then also started consulting for my family business. It was through that experience that I could get a sense of if the timing was right and if this was really something that I wanted to do and was ready to do. After lots of soul searching with Sydney, I decided when that timing was right. And I've been at my family business full time since the start of the year. It has exceeded expectations, actually.
That's awesome. Are you willing to share a little bit about what you're doing in your family business? Because you get to touch a bunch of different functions or play a couple of different keys all at the same time.
My goal for the family business is that this is a very substantial chapter of my career.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make that move until I really felt like it was something I was going to be able to commit to for really. So my team jokes. Just this morning, one of my coworkers says, "We're going to get you a bumper sticker that says Rome wasn't built in a day."
That,
I'm saying it's people I
yeah.
work with because I feel like in the last few jobs I've taken, it's like I was hired for this very urgent need, and you get thrown into the deep end and you sink or swim. This just is a different pace. I'm onboarding, I'm learning as much as I can. I don't need to immediately reveal my ROI to defend the headcount that I'm taking up. I have a whole bunch of ideas and things that I would love to accomplish, and some of them are going to happen in a week, and some of them are going to happen in a year, and some of them are going to happen in a decade. Because in a family
Yeah.
business, you're not thinking in terms of quarterly returns, you're thinking in terms of generations. Totally different time horizon, and it's really refreshing.
And Julia, one thing that is not so obvious from looking at your resume or maybe looking at your LinkedIn profile, but has come through a little in this conversation as we were talking about your fitness career and the Pilates instruction that you do, is that you have your hands in so many different things. And I know one mindset shift over the past few years has been thinking about your career in terms of instead of a main dish, more of a charcuterie board that
Yes.
in a few different pieces and things to sample that make you feel full and fulfilled. Tell us about how you define a charcuterie board and all the different pieces of your board.
Yes. My friend sent me a meme recently. I said, do you ever meet someone and just know that they were very involved on campus?
How did we know that was you?
That's me. I love to be involved in different things. I love to have different perspectives. And it really wasn't until I got to Tuck and a mentor said to me, being a jack of all trades is not something to be ashamed of. It's what makes you
Yeah,
a general manager. I constantly have to remind myself that Swiss Army knife, that jack of all trades, that all-around athlete, that is a valued skill set. And I have to keep reminding myself that when the imposter syndrome sets in. I'm not a finance whiz, but I'm also not a marketing whiz, but I'm also not a BD leader. I can get 80% of the way there in any of those areas, but also know when to call in the experts.
yeah,
I think about that in my role, but then I also think about that in my broader life. I have a day job, but I'm also a fitness instructor. I also lead a community of women who are passionate about women's health. I also lead a seminar every fall for the incoming students at Tuck. There are all these different things that are all pieces of me, and I finally realized that it doesn't all have to be in one place. I alluded at the top of this conversation that when I was in college, I didn't want to work in consulting because I needed to know that I was doing a mission that was important to me. If I could go back and talk to my college self, I would say, listen, you can do both. Your
yeah.
mission doesn't have to be your day job. It
Hmm.
can be, but you can also find a day job that really taps into your skill set that you find fulfilling because it's challenging. Or maybe your mission is just being a really good
Yep.
boss and your
Yeah.
contribution to society is that the people who work for you are happy. And then on the side, you can be on the board of this nonprofit or you can do these other things. I would go back and tell myself that there are other ways to scratch that mission itch than just your number one thing. And the older I've gotten and the more I've whittled down what the things that are most important to me are, the more I've been able to make sure that my charcuterie board has a little bit of each of them, but that they can come from different places.
I have this image of your charcuterie board being like the perfect Instagram ready, perfectly curated mix of different dips and cheese.
You know, I arrange a mean charcuterie.
But I also think it's such an important point because it takes the pressure off of one single job. And in the same way, there's that wisdom around dating and finding your partner is that you shouldn't rely on a single person to make you entirely happy and to fulfill all your dreams. You need your partner, you need your friends, you need your activities. And it's the same thing with a job where you want to make sure there's alignment with your job, but you can spread out where you're finding that fulfillment.
I 1000% agree. Finding a job that has that flexibility or a person that has
Yeah,
that flexibility, a significant other that allows you to spread your wings and do other things.
yeah, yeah. So many of us were so actively involved in campus. I think there's probably a common thread amongst most of my clients leading every single extracurricular. And then we get into our adult life and it just gets busy and we lose those pieces. It takes intentionality to be able to bring them back or create space for them within your day to day life, but it can be so meaningful and fulfilling too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one of the reasons I feel like you have gotten such clarity on what goes on your charcuterie board is because of your operating principles, your values, your priorities, your anchors that you just need in your life to feel grounded and aligned. And I know yours, Julia, it was like, oh, duh. Those are my operating principles. I already knew them because they've always been such a core part of you. And we just put some more shape and form around them, put them down on paper. What are your operating principles and how have they shaped your life?
Yes, it felt so good this morning when I went back to the journal where I wrote down my
Yeah.
operating principles with you 2 years ago, because I really do feel like I'm living in alignment with them. And it was
Yay.
fulfilling. So my operating principles, one of the big ones is around legacy, family, ritual, tradition.
Mm.
I feel that every day when I walk into work. When you walk into our lobby, the gifts that my grandfather's clients gave him over the years, the little wooden tooth, I feel it and I see it. and it fills me up. Just
That
this morning,
is
I got
so
to of our facility to one of our vendors, and it fills me with the most pride to see my family's history right there in front of me. I think that in some ways segues over to community. Having a community is so important to me. And I think especially in the days that we were working from home, I really felt like that was missing. And then once I joined a fitness studio and ultimately started teaching there, that became an outlet of community for me, seeing people week after week and being able to follow up. How's your birthday party? How's the bachelorette party going that you're planning for your sister? That means a lot to me.
yeah.
And then I've also gradually formed this community of other women who are very passionate about women's health. And we meet monthly on Zoom. And even though I've never met most of them in person, that community getting to one, discuss a topic that we're all really passionate about, but two, like be part of each other's lives as we get promoted, quit our jobs,
Hmm.
go branch out on our own, buy houses, have these life
Yeah.
milestones has been really meaningful. So just that sense of community was something that I'm always looking for. Stemming off of that, my cousin a few years ago said to me, Julia, you're really a community organizer. And when I hear community organizer, I think about like Barack Obama on the south side of Chicago,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
not me.
Yeah.
But it was interesting when she said that, I realized, yeah, I think part of the reason I am so involved on campus is I love to pull together like-minded people. Nothing I love more than brokering a relationship, whether it's introducing like-minded people, someone, a job posting that I think they'd be perfect for. I just love making those connections. So if that's what a community organizer is, it's not the South Side of Chicago, it's just LinkedIn or whatever, but that matchmaking is really where I originally cut my chops in leadership.
Hmm.
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about wellness. And when we say wellness, you picture like green juice and yoga. And of
Yeah.
course, the fitness instructor part of me is like, wellness. But if there's anything I can use this opportunity to reflect on, it's that I did go through a really brutal period with my health when I first met you, Sydney, and
Yeah.
really kind of threw me out of alignment for a long time after having my first COVID infection, post vaccines and everything. I just never got better. And I thought, this is long COVID, I have chronic fatigue. Ultimately, I was diagnosed with a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I always thought that I was just very flexible and kind of clumsy and got hurt often, but it turned out there was a reason for that. In conjunction, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and it's all now being treated. And I've refound myself. But for a long time, the most important thing to me was just taking care of my body. I had always thought that wellness was running and eating salads
Yeah.
and going for walks and going to therapy. And yeah, all of that's wellness, but so is getting a ton of sleep, building that intuition so when you wake up in the morning, you don't berate yourself for being lazy if you can't get out of bed, but instead listening to your body and saying, actually, I think I need another hour of sleep instead of working out this morning. And I know when I get out of alignment because I can now feel my nervous system kicking in. For a year and a half, I was living in fight or flight mode. And finally, Sydney, you and I worked on creating a morning ritual. And
Yeah.
do that morning ritual. I sit up in bed in the morning and I set my intentions for the day before I get up so that I can keep my heart rate as steady as possible so that I don't have that cortisol spike when I jump out of bed with my alarm. And so that sense of wellness, you've got to put on your own mask before you can put on someone else's. How am I going to create change in the world if I'm hanging on by a thread?
Well, and also how well you've uniquely defined wellness for yourself, and that it isn't necessarily only drinking green juice or going to Pilates 5 days a week, but it is caring for yourself and making sure that every single decision you're making is through the lens of wellness and how you're going to feel and how just fundamental, non negotiable it is for you now.
I remember like even in college feeling like if I wasn't fully strung out by the time I got to spring break, I hadn't worked hard enough to earn it.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't dead on the couch by Friday night, I hadn't earned my weekend. And now I've flipped the script and no, you don't want to put in 100% 5 days a week so that you can be at 20 for the other two. You want to put in 70% all across the board so that you can
Yeah.
consistently. That's what wellness is now.
Yeah. I think from our first conversation where you had talked about you had only had one deer, which was 120%. And half of our work was about figuring out how to maintain 70% in a more sustained way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was like 120% or 0%. And I think so many women wrestle with that because we feel like we're only successful if we've left every single drop of sweat and tears out on the field.
And I have to tell you, especially in my new role where
Yeah.
I have these, the voices in my head and the voices of society about I'm a Nepo baby. Did I get this job out of merit? Maybe I could have, but I don't want to feel like I'm have to prove that it was merit. I think it's really easy to feel this pressure of, well, I have to prove that I've earned this and I have to break my back to show that I'm smart enough and I'm good enough and that I deserve this. Because at the end of the day, I can't change what my last name is. It doesn't matter how hard
Yeah.
I work. And to just trust that I am smart, I am driven, but that also I want this to be my job for the next 3 decades and I can't burn myself out.
You are literally running a marathon now.
Built in a day.
How Rome was built over centuries.
I need the bumper sticker
You do.
because I keep reminding myself Rome was not built in a day. You have an entire
Yeah.
career, hopefully in this job, you don't have anything to prove.
And Julia, I would think there's going to be few to zero women listening to this conversation who are at their family's businesses for the next 4 decades. But we're all trying to build our careers for the long term sustainability. And we're all operating like we're sprinting, like we're
Mhm.
running the 10-yard dash in the Olympics. And any business school course would have taught us to prioritize the long term thinking over the short term thinking. But somehow that doesn't connect when we think about our personal mindset
Yeah.
and the punishment or the pressure that we put on our energy and our physical bodies to grind at the very early part of our career.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's just not sustainable and it's not healthy. And I think it would be harder. I don't know if I'd be as anchored saying this if I was working at a startup the way that I was before, where it was so frenetic, was just constant hustle. And I succumbed to that pretty easily. But I'm in a different industry now, I'm in a different setting, and I do think I'm in a place that peer pressures me in a positive direction.
Yeah. And I think you've made choices to really set up your career so you could be in a setting that really supports you, but also aligns with all of your operating principles too. So we talked about legacy and ritual, which has been
Yeah.
such a firm driver, community, and you being a community organizer, connector, convener always, wellness. And then I think you have one or two more that are really important to you.
And leadership and intuition. And I want to talk about two different pieces of that. So I'm feeling nostalgic as I look at this and I think about my chapters. When it comes to leadership, as I said, even during my early years at the think tank, that's what I was passionate about. When I was deciding, you and I were talking about, is the time right? Am I ready to leave my career in healthcare to go to the family business? And I'd always thought that healthcare would segue really easily into the family business, but once I spent time in both, I realized that yes, it's dental products, but a big part of it is manufacturing. And it's not care delivery the way I was used to. And you and I talked about, am I ready to give up this healthcare career that I've built, the network, the knowledge, up to the minute on what's happening in value-based care arrangements in exchange for going to the family business, fulfilling this legacy, etc. And really what I decided was that on this one hand, the healthcare hand, especially in startups, the leadership opportunities were not really there. Most of the time, I was an individual contributor, and that's not where I thrive.
Hmm.
So on the family business side, sure, it's not pure play healthcare. I'm not going to scratch that itch. And it's a huge leadership opportunity. And so it's a trade-off rather than thinking I'm giving up healthcare. It's like I'm leaning less heavily into healthcare and more heavily into leadership. And so when we decided I was ready, it was, am I ready to tip the seesaw a little bit? And so that plays to this leadership piece, which is something that brings me so much joy. Leading people and seeing them thrive is, to me, the ultimate, like, go to sleep happy at the end of the day. I've learned to listen to my intuition because I know that it's there. That leadership intuition is something that I've seen firsthand really play out, whether it was, you got to get out of this job because the funding is going to get cut in 6 months. Or when my husband and I found the house that we now live in. And I think listening to that intuition and being willing to take a step back and take that gamble, I've seen time and time again that it works out for me. So I've finally learned to trust the voice when I hear it.
Julia, you have learned to hear your intuition and then also trust and act on it. And that's something in the coaching world gets a lot of airtime. Like, use your intuition, connect to it, but it often can feel so nebulous and a little out of reach to a lot of people. I'm curious, what do you feel so important about using your intuition? And then how do you feel like you've honed the muscle around hearing and listening to it? Any pro tips?
I don't know that I have a great answer, but in the business world, everything is data driven,
Yep.
right? You need proof points, you need use cases, you need to see the return. And I think that can really easily undermine the power of intuition. And there have been times that I haven't listened to my intuition because I try and follow, what do the data say? And frankly, Sydney, I think just having you as a sounding board is the way that I figured out a lot of
Mm.
these things. Is I'll come to you and I'll say, this feels really impulsive. Do you think I'm being impulsive?
And then what do I say to you?
You say, no, this is really in keeping with your operating principles.
Yeah.
But you'll say, you just said X and that aligned with your operating principles,
Yeah.
or like the decision you're making is backed in data. I think there's this feeling of like, oh, well, I need to have a financial model to back up everything. And some of the times I've done due diligence on things and looked at the wrong things, I ended up in the wrong place.
My mom's always making fun of my spreadsheets when I'm trying to make decisions. And I'm like, no, no, I have to create the spreadsheet to figure out what the numbers are, but also give me more time and space to figure out what I actually feel. And then I'll make the decision on how I feel. And she's like, stop with the spreadsheets. You don't need those.
No, it's important.
Yeah. And as you said, that's the beauty of having the operating principles written down because at an objective moment in time, you're defining what's important to you. And then at a less objective moment in time, when you're forced with the big decision or you're getting this intuitive hit, you are able to compare it to, okay, what did I say was important to me and what do I know?
We don't overvalue these variables that don't actually matter,
Yeah.
especially when like prestige comes into play or things like that that can really,
Other people's opinions. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, two questions left for you, Julia. Tell us more about your personal philosophy around leadership. It's been something that you have been studying and honing for years. And I know reflection's a big part of it, but what do you believe around leadership?
I could talk about reflection all day, but before I get into that, I'll start with a piece of advice that one of my mentors at CVS gave me. She said to me right before I hired my first direct report, when you become a manager, you become the topic of dinner table conversation. And that has stuck with me because at the time I was so hungry to hire a direct report. I think she really wanted to make sure that I was doing it for the right reasons. not for the prestige, not to climb the ladder. Other than a spouse, a boss is really the other person that can truly dictate your quality of life. And good things or bad things, they're going to take that home with them at the end of the day. And it's dinner table conversation. And to me, I've always felt it's an honor and a privilege to play that role in someone's life. Do not abuse it. And it's my responsibility to give people a good holistic life and to go home and feel good about themselves and the lives that they have. And so it's finding people's strengths and helping them play into them. It's giving feedback so that they can grow and improve. And I think for me, reflection is really important as a leader, taking a step back and thinking about what have I learned? What can I learn from the people that I'm leading? What can I learn from these experiences that I'm having? How could I have done that differently? Faced with a similar situation in the future, what would I do? I think if you don't reflect as things happen, you're drinking out of a fire hose, you don't learn anything from it.
How do you make time for reflection, Julia? Or how do you hold yourself accountable to that? Because we're just in this fast-paced world, and I feel like usually things are happening 100 miles an hour, and it's hard to get that mind space.
I love my rituals. For the last 10 years, every single night have written a couple sentences about my day in a line of day journal. And so I just started my third one. So it's been exactly 10
Wow,
years.
cool.
And what I was doing
Yeah.
1 year ago, 5 years
Yep.
ago, you can see the growth. Look back and see from an entry level job what was
That
stressing
is
me out at the
wild.
time. So that's one. It forces me at the end of the day to just look back on my day. Something else that I do, and this is a great hack for listeners, at the end of a day where I feel like I have not processed my day, I get in the car and I open a new note in my phone and I say, "Hey Siri, look at my dashboard."
I'm ready, Julia. I'm so ready.
And I start brain dumping.
Yeah.
And she transcribes it all into this note. And when I get home, sometimes I pull out some action items.
Yeah.
It helps me just like get it all out of my brain.
Yeah.
And that way, my husband doesn't have to sit at dinner for 2 hours and listen to me process everything. I can just tell him the greatest hits. That has helped me a lot on days that I feel like I haven't had a minute to process things very quickly.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a good idea. And I feel like anyone could do that, whether they're commuting on the train or they're walking to and from work.
I
Yeah.
truly believe that commutes are the most underrated
Yeah.
resource. In the morning, sometimes I listen to the news, especially with the trade war has really affected us. But a lot
Yeah.
of times, I'll use it to just get ready for my day. Think about what are my priorities for the day, or what happened today that I feel like I need to process, or I'll call my mom, which is another way I process things.
Yeah.
I think a commute is underrated.
I totally agree. Okay, Julia, last question. You have the mic to talk to almost 10,000 women on the other end of this microphone. What's a message that you want to share with them or something that you want them to take away from our conversation?
Trusting your intuition, just to keep coming back to that, is so important. I think about it when I had these medical mysteries and doctors didn't believe there was something. I just had a sense that the funding in my business unit was going to get cut and that I was
Yep.
going to be put on the defense and I'd rather play offense. I think about it when I knew that I didn't like the person that I was becoming when I went to college and that it was important to take a step back and redirect myself. Listen to your intuition. You can use tools, you can use AI. I wish that when I'd had these health mysteries, I could have dropped it into ChatGPT or Perplexity and figure it out. You can work with your intuition and figure out what is this telling me. That's really what I would say to people is spend time with yourself and enjoy your own company enough that you value what that intuition has to say.
Yeah. Could not have said it better myself. There's no better guide than your intuition, and it's like a superpower we've all been given.
You
Yeah.
just have to give it time to talk. If you constantly are filling your mind with external stimulation, you need to spend time with yourself so that you learn to listen to yourself.
Yeah. It's a little mic drop moment. So we're going to stop it there. Thank you, Julia.
This was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.